Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I stopped there, in that space between worlds, the living room behind me, the kitchen ahead, and in the middle of it all, Corinne. For 10 years, she had been the center of my universe. The woman I had built a life with, shared secrets with, dreamed with, but the woman I saw now, she felt like a stranger. She was on the phone. Her back was mostly to me, a graceful curve of her spine as she leaned against the cool granite of the countertop. One hand held her cell phone to her ear, the other idly shuffled a stack of papers into a sleek leather folder. The late afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, catching the highlights in her dark hair, making her look like a painting, a masterpiece of calm and control. Her tone was light, carefree. A soft laugh escaped her lips, a sound that used to warm me to my core. Now, it sent a chill crawling up my spine. Her expression was distant, her eyes focused on something far beyond the walls of our home. She spoke of reservations, dates, flights. On the surface, it was just business, the normal routine of her demanding career. She was ambitious, driven. It was one of the things I first loved about her, but something was wrong. It was the smile. It wasn't her professional smile, the one she used for clients. This was different, softer, more genuine. It was a smile that didn't belong to a business call. It belonged to something intimate, a private joke, a shared secret. An uneasiness settled in my chest, heavy and cold, a knot of dread tightening with every lilting word she spoke. When she finally finished the call, she hung up with a quiet, "See you soon," and placed the phone on the counter as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just spent 10 minutes talking to someone who made her smile in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months, maybe years. She turned then, and her eyes met mine. That light, carefree tone didn't waver. It simply redirected. "Hey," she said, as if just noticing me. "I'll be traveling tomorrow." She said it so casually, like she was telling me we were out of milk. "It's a business trip," she continued, moving to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of sparkling water. "Something important for my career just came up. I'll be gone for 3 days." I remained silent. For a few seconds, the only sound in the room was the fizz of her drink as she poured it into a glass. I tried to process it. A sudden trip. 3 days. She hadn't mentioned anything about traveling this month. We had plans. A dinner with friends on Saturday. A lazy Sunday we'd promised each other. My voice, when I finally found it, sounded foreign to my own ears. Hoarse. A trip? That was all I could manage. Corinne took a delicate sip of her water, her gaze unwavering. "Yes. It's a last-minute opportunity. We need to close a big deal." The knot in my chest tightened. My heart began a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I had to ask, even though a part of me, a terrified, instinctual part, already knew the answer and was screaming at me to just turn around and walk away, to just let it go. But I couldn't. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice a little stronger this time. "And with whom? Why are you only telling me now, Corinne?" The silence stretched, and for the first time, I saw a flicker, a crack in the perfect facade. Her eyes wavered. Just for a moment. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift that told me everything I needed to know. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. Replaced by that same unnerving calm. A calmness that bothered me more than any shouting match ever could. That's when I knew. Before she even spoke the words, I knew my life was about to break in two. "It's with Leland," she said. The name hung in the air between us. Leland. The company director. The man she had mentioned more and more frequently over the past 6 months. A man of vision, a dynamic leader, a man whose name, on her lips, always carried a little too much admiration. She tried to frame it as a team trip at first, an opportunity to align strategies, to get ahead of the competition. Her words were smooth, polished, rehearsed, but I saw right through them. "Leland?" I repeated, keeping my voice steady, though my hands had started to tremble. "Just you and Leland? Why not the whole team, if it's about strategy?" And that was it, the question that made her stop pretending. She let out a soft sigh, a sound not of frustration, but of resignation, as if she was tired of the performance. She leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms. The mask of the diligent professional fell away, revealing something colder, harder. "Elias," she began, her voice dropping to a low, confessional tone. "Leland and we've been growing closer for some time." Each word was a precise, calculated blow. "This trip," she continued, her eyes fixed on mine, searching for. What? A reaction? A breakdown? It's important for personal reasons, too. She called it networking, a chance to build a stronger professional bond. But the way she said it, the slight flush on her cheeks, betrayed any attempt at a professional justification. The truth was there, glaring, ugly, undeniable. It stood between us, a ghost that had been haunting our home for months, now finally made visible. She was involved with another man. My wife of 10 years was having an affair. A tightness seized my chest, a brutal combination of disbelief and shame. How had I not seen it? The late nights at the office, the guarded texts, the emotional distance that had grown into a chasm between us. But Corinne seemed unfazed by her own confession. On the contrary, she took another sip of water, her movements deliberate and graceful. She spoke as if she were discussing a quarterly report, not dismantling a decade of our lives. Leland has vision, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. He's dynamic. With him, I feel motivated. She paused, then looked directly at me. With you, Elias, everything has become too predictable. You've settled. You stopped surprising me. You stopped taking care of me. You stopped fighting. The words were harsh, cruel. Each sentence a carefully sharpened blade, slid between my ribs. It felt like a script, a justification she had been practicing in her head for weeks. I don't see any spark in our marriage anymore, she said. I feel trapped in a boring routine. The way she described our years together, our life, it hurt more than the thought of a physical betrayal. She didn't yell. She didn't get emotional. She didn't hesitate. She spoke like someone who had already made a decision, like someone who had already ended our story, long before she bothered to tell me. I tried to find a reaction that made sense. Part of me wanted to scream, to break something, to demand to know if this was the same woman who had stood before me, tears in her eyes, and vowed a lifetime of partnership and unconditional love. But there was something else inside me, something stronger, a cold, hard core of dignity that refused to be dragged through tears or humiliation. It rose up, silencing the rage, silencing the pain. I looked into her eyes, and I just listened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg, because in that moment, more than anger, what I felt was an immense, bottomless disappointment. She watched me for a moment, perhaps waiting for the explosion that never came. When it didn't, she simply nodded, as if to herself. I need to finish packing, she said, her voice back to that casual, matter-of-fact tone. She picked up the leather folder from the counter and walked past me, heading upstairs. No hug, no apology, no request to think things over. She was in a hurry, and that was it. The end of my marriage, announced between the living room and the kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon. I stood there for a long time after she left, the silence of the house pressing in on me, and slowly, painfully, everything started to make sense. The delayed replies to my messages, the flimsy excuses for working late, the canceled dinner plans. I realized I had been living alone for some time, but only today did I finally have the courage to accept it. It was as if I had awakened from a long, comfortable sleep, only to find my house had burned down around me. The love that once moved me had now transformed into a terrible, chilling lucidity, and with this new perspective, this cold, hard clarity, I took the first steps toward what I needed to do, the kind of action that doesn't require drama, but intelligence, the kind of response that isn't given with shouts, but with strategy. I knew it was the end of something, but perhaps it was the beginning of something much greater. Chapter 3. Strategy in the Shadows. The next morning was a study in surrealism. Corinne moved through our shared space with the detached efficiency of a stranger. She showered, dressed with meticulous care, selecting an outfit that was both professional and alluring. She gathered the last of her things, her suitcase standing by the bedroom door like an unexploded bomb. As she was leaving the room, she said it, simply, "I'll be back on Monday." I was sitting on the edge of the bed, already dressed. I had been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my chest a tight knot of recycled pain. I didn't look at her, I just gave a slight nod. She left, through the front door, just like any other day. No kiss goodbye, no backward glance, no sign of guilt or reconciliation, just the absence of everything that had once held us together. I remained motionless, listening to the distant sound of her car engine starting, and then fading down the street. No sigh, no gesture, just silence. When I was sure she was gone, truly gone. I stood up. My movements felt stiff, robotic. I walked not to the kitchen for coffee, but straight to the small office at the back of the house. I turned on the computer. The hum of the machine filled the silence. My hands trembled slightly as I placed them on the keyboard, but my eyes were firm. My mind was clear. I typed the words precisely into the search bar. Private investigator. Clearwater area. Several results appeared. I read each name carefully. I didn't want amateurs. I didn't want someone who would be sloppy. I needed a professional, discreet, effective. I visited websites, read reviews, compared prices. I spent nearly an hour until I found an agency that seemed trustworthy. Professional, with years of experience and stellar testimonials. I picked up the phone and dialed. The voice on the other end was confident, direct, no nonsense. I explained the situation without embellishment, without emotion. My voice was a monotone. My wife, I said, has traveled for 3 days with the director of the company where she works. I need confirmation. I need proof. Photos, records, anything that documents what she has already admitted. I provided the details with surgical precision. Full names. The address of the resort hotel in Key West she had once mentioned Leland loved. Her flight times, which I had found on her laptop. I emailed photos of her, and one of Leland I found on the company's website. The investigator on the other end took notes. He promised results within 48 hours. He said he had a local team ready to go. They would start immediately. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than pain or shame. I felt control. With my email still open, I composed another message. This one was to a lawyer my firm had used in the past, a man known for being sharp, ruthless, and incredibly discreet. I explained the situation again, this time from a legal perspective. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about preparation. I wanted to prepare for the divorce quietly, quickly, and with an unassailable legal foundation. The pain I carried was deep, a wound that would take a long time to heal, but I couldn't let it paralyze me. I had to transform it into action. I wasn't seeking confrontation. I was seeking justice. I wanted to close this chapter with the same dignity I had offered throughout our years of marriage, a dignity she had so carelessly thrown away. The silence of the house was now an ally. Each decision I made that morning seemed to lift a small weight from my chest. For the rest of the day, I maintained my routine as best I could. I went to work. I answered calls. I sat in meetings. But inside, everything had changed. I no longer saw myself as the deceived husband. I saw myself as someone who had finally woken up. The end had begun there, at the kitchen door, when Corinne confessed. But now I was the one writing the conclusion, and I wouldn't let it be in vain. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was the investigator. We're on the case. Subjects located. They entered the hotel together. They are checked into the same suite. Currently heading out for dinner. I read the message. Then I read it again. No shock, no tears. Just the cold, hard confirmation that I had made the right decision. The marriage had ended long before the suitcase was packed. The only difference was that now, everything was being documented. The next 3 days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I worked. I ate. I slept, but all of it felt like watching a movie of someone else's life. My real focus was on the steady stream of updates from the investigator. Photos, timestamps, short, factual reports. Corinne and Leland having a candlelit dinner, his hand covering hers on the table. Corinne and Leland laughing by the hotel pool, her head resting on his shoulder. Corinne and Leland entering their suite late at night, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. Each image was a fresh stab of pain, but also a piece of a puzzle I was assembling. The evidence was irrefutable. Cold, hard, factual. By Monday afternoon, exactly at the expected time, I heard it. The familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. I was sitting in the living room, in the dark. I didn't move. I just watched through the window as she got out. The sound of the car door slamming shut. The click-clack of her suitcase wheels on the sidewalk. She would walk in as if nothing had happened, as if she had just returned from a routine work matter. No burden of guilt, no expression of regret. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I had spent the morning organizing everything with meticulous precision. I had received the final report from the investigator. I had reviewed every image. I had spoken with my lawyer. Everything was printed out, compiled into a thick, black folder. I left it in the center of the dining room table, prominent, visible, impossible to ignore. When the front door opened, I stood up. I moved to stand in the doorway to the hall, a silent sentinel in my own home. Corinne entered, wearing the same stylish coat she had left in. She glanced at me, a forced high on her lips, expecting a normal reaction. Perhaps a comment about her trip, but I remained silent. My eyes were fixed on the folder on the table. Her gaze followed mine. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She set her suitcase down next to the couch and walked slowly towards the table. She hesitated for a moment, then touched the folder. Opened it. It took only a few seconds. The first page was a high-resolution photo of her and Leland kissing on their hotel balcony, the sunset painting the sky behind them. Her breath hitched. She turned one page, then another. Her face, which had been a mask of cool composure, began to crumble. The blood drained from her cheeks. Next to the images were copies of the hotel bills, the restaurant receipts, all paid for with a company credit card. And at the very end of the folder, the divorce papers, already filled out and waiting for her signature. Tucked inside was a short, handwritten letter from me. Corinne, trust is not a thing you can break and then glue back together. You made your choice. Now I am making mine. Elias. She read it in silence, her hands trembling. The coldness she had carried for so long finally cracked, shattering into a million pieces. When she finished, she raised her eyes. Her panicked gaze found me standing in the doorway. Elias, she began, her voice a desperate whisper. I held up a hand, stopping her. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of the last 3 days, the weight of 10 years. The marriage ended the moment you decided to cross a line with no return, I said. Your choices have consequences, Corinne. Now you have to deal with them. She started to argue, a torrent of desperate excuses. Things were confusing. The trip didn't mean what it looked like. Her relationship with Leland wasn't official, but each word came out weak, desperate, devoid of conviction. I remained firm. Trust has been destroyed, I repeated. I have already taken all the necessary legal steps. My lawyer's contact information is with the papers. I then delivered the final blow. You have 3 days to remove your personal belongings from the house. She tried to approach me then, her hands outstretched as if to plead. I took a step back. There's nothing left to discuss, I said, and then she lost it. The control, the composure, it all vanished. She began to cry, sobbing. She asked how I could do this to her. She shouted that I was being cruel, but what seemed to hit her the hardest was my serenity, my calm. Through her tears, she looked at me, and I saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. With steady eyes, I replied, my voice unwavering, I'm not being cruel. I am simply ending what you, yourself, already buried. I paused, letting the words sink in. This isn't about revenge, Corinne. It's about self-respect. She fumbled for her phone, dialed a number, then hung up before it could even ring. The mask of the self-confident, powerful woman had fallen away completely. For the first time, she looked lost. She left the house about an hour later, taking only the suitcase she had brought back from the trip. As she walked out the door, she whispered that she would be back for the rest of her things. I simply responded, arrange it with my lawyer. She didn't insist. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. From the gate, I watched until the car disappeared down the street. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. But I also didn't feel regret. It was a necessary pain. A surgical cut, deep and clean, to prevent the soul from rotting away. I went back inside. I collected the black folder from the table, locked it away in my desk drawer, and took a deep breath. The storm had passed, and I had weathered it without screaming, without begging, without losing myself. The black folder wasn't just my leverage for the divorce. It was more than that. The photos the investigator had sent were not just compromising images of two people. They were evidence, hard evidence, complete with times, locations, and dates. Corinne and Leland, using a hotel suite paid for by their company, dining at expensive restaurants on the corporate card, toasting with champagne while their worlds, unbeknownst to them, were beginning to crumble. In the quiet of my office that night, I gathered everything. I scanned the receipts. I attached the photos. I organized it all into a neat, professional dossier. I attached it to a cold, direct email. The recipient was the chairman of the board of directors of the company where they both worked, a man I knew by reputation to be a stickler for ethics and corporate governance. The email was anonymous, no signature, just facts. Subject: misuse of corporate funds in violation of conduct policy by senior management. The body of the email was short. Attached is documented evidence of an inappropriate personal relationship between director Leland Ashford and senior manager Corinne Vance, conducted during a business trip and funded entirely by company resources. Is this the kind of behavior you reward with leadership positions? I hit send, and then I closed my laptop. 2 days later, the fallout began. An extraordinary meeting was called. An internal investigation was launched. The accusation was serious: misuse of corporate funds for personal purposes. Embezzlement, in layman's terms. The images told a story that no expense report could justify. The committee had no doubts. Leland was fired for gross misconduct. Corinne was also terminated, both for directly violating the company's compliance policy. Entire careers collapsed in a single morning. Hours after the dismissal, my phone rang. It was her. I answered. "You destroyed my life." She screamed into the phone, her voice raw with hysteria and disbelief. "What did you do?" I listened in silence for a few seconds. "You sent those pictures, didn't you?" she shrieked. "How could you have the nerve?" And that's when my patience, the iron control I had maintained for days, finally snapped. My voice rose, firm and loaded with a week of pent-up anger. "Nerve?" I shot back, my voice dangerously low. "Nerve? You stood in my kitchen, and you lied to my face. You betrayed 10 years of my life, and you have the audacity to talk to me about nerve? Get out of my life, Corinne," I said, the words sharp and final. "Get out of my life with your lover and your rotten pride." I hung up before she could respond. My blood was pounding in my temples. It was weeks of suppressed rage, erupting in a single, volcanic burst. And I didn't regret it for a second. Half an hour later, according to my lawyer who heard the story later, Corinne received another call. It was Leland, but his voice, once full of charm and promises, was now filled with hatred. "Your husband ruined my career," he spat. I was exposed, humiliated. "They kicked me out without even letting me clean out my desk. This is your fault." She tried to speak, stammered something about facing it together, finding a way out. Leland cut her off sharply. "You think we have something? Spare me. You were a distraction. An amusement that has now cost me everything. Stay out of my life before I drag you into the lawsuit I'm about to file against the company." And he hung up. The ground she thought was so firm beneath her feet had simply collapsed. She lost her job. She lost her lover. She lost her respect. And above all, she lost me. The one person who, for 10 years, had stood by her side when no one else did. The taste of humiliation, I imagined, was bitter. And for the first time in her life, she felt the fall without a safety net, without anyone to lean on. She was utterly and completely alone. 4 years. 4 years passed since the day Corinne left my house for the last time. In those 4 years, my world had been quietly, painstakingly rebuilt. The divorce was finalized quickly. The house, once full of ghosts, was sold. I moved into a new apartment in a different part of the city. I focused on my work, on my health, on healing the deep, jagged wound she had left behind. I learned later, through mutual acquaintances, that Corinne's world had crumbled even more than she could have imagined. The scandal followed her like a shadow. She tried to find another job in her field, but her reputation was ruined. She drifted, living off small contracts, moving from city to city, trying to escape the whispers and the pitying glances. I never heard from Leland again. He vanished from the corporate world. As for me, I learned to breathe again. And then, I met Clara. She wasn't like Corinne. She wasn't a storm. She was a quiet harbor. She was kind, with a calm gaze and a laugh that was genuine and warm. She came into my life when I had lost all faith in any kind of fresh start, and she showed me that I could still be truly loved. We built a life together, a real one, based on honesty, respect, and a quiet, steady affection that felt more real than any passionate drama I had known before. And then came Hazel, my daughter, a little girl with my eyes and Clara's smile, who filled our home with a kind of joy I never knew was possible. One Saturday afternoon, I was at the supermarket downtown. I had Hazel perched on my shoulders, her small hands tangled in my hair. "Hold on tight, Missy," I said, laughing as I pretended to be an airplane, weaving through the aisles. "Daddy's your airplane." Her laughter was pure magic, a high, breathless sound that made my heart swell. As we were leaving, I heard a loud burst of laughter from across the street. Instinctively, I glanced over, and there, like a punch to the chest, I saw her, Corinne. She was different. So different from the woman I remembered. Thinner, Her clothes were worn. Her hair was unkempt. The fire, the ambition, the cold confidence that had once defined her, it was all gone, replaced by a look of weary resignation. She was just standing there, motionless, watching me. Time seemed to stop. Just then, Clara walked up beside me, carrying a small bag of groceries. She touched my arm gently. "Ready to go, flyboy?" she asked, smiling. I turned and smiled back at her, the sight of Corinne already fading from my mind. I kissed Clara lightly. Hazel, from her perch on my shoulders, leaned down and hugged both of us around the neck at the same time, squealing with delight. It was a simple scene, a normal family moment, but as I looked back across the street, Corinne was still there, frozen, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, or hatred, or even satisfaction. I just felt a profound, aching sadness for her, because in that simple, beautiful moment of my new life, I knew she was finally seeing firsthand, in excruciating detail, exactly what it means to lose what you never valued. 2 days after that unexpected encounter, my phone rang. It was late. Hazel was asleep, and Clara was reading in the other room. I was in my study, looking over some work for the next day. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the button. "Hello?" There was a silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought it was a wrong number. Then, a hesitant voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 4 years, but that I would recognize anywhere. "Elias, it's me, Corinne." The silence that followed was heavy. I didn't know what to say. What did she want? "What do you want, Corinne?" I finally asked, my tone neutral, not angry, just tired. She swallowed hard. I could hear it over the phone. "I saw you," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "the other day. At the market, with the little girl." A pause. Is she your daughter?" "Yes," I replied, my voice softening just a bit at the thought of my daughter. "Her name is Hazel. She changed my life." Another pause. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "And the woman who was with you, is she your wife?" "That's Clara," I said, a warmth spreading through my chest. "She's the woman who showed me that I could still be truly loved. Who came into my life when I thought I was broken beyond repair." I heard a soft sob on the other end. She started, her voice choked with emotion. "I just called to say, I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did to you. I ruined the best thing I ever had." Silence took over again. But this time, I took a deep breath before I responded. I thought about the pain, the betrayal, the long, lonely nights. And then, I thought about Clara's hand in mine, and Hazel's laughter echoing through our home. "You destroyed me, Corinne," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You threw me into the deepest pit imaginable without a second thought. But you know what?" I paused. "That's where I discovered who I really am. I rebuilt my life from the pieces you broke. And as painful as it was, I'm grateful. Because in the end, it's what set me free." She was crying openly now. Soft, broken sounds of regret. Do you forgive me?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. What did forgiveness mean? Did it mean forgetting? No. I would never forget. Did it mean condoning what she did? Absolutely not. But it did mean letting go of the anger, letting go of the bitterness that had poisoned my heart for so long. "I forgive you," I said. And I meant it. But forgiveness isn't an invitation to come back into my life. It's a goodbye without resentment. She tried to say something else, but I cut her off gently. "Take care of yourself, Corinne. I mean that, because those who don't learn from their pain are doomed to repeat it." And with that, I ended the call. I stared at the dark screen of my phone for a moment. For the first time, I felt a sense of complete and total closure. Losing me wasn't her punishment. It was simply the consequence. I put the phone down, walked out of my study, and wrapped my arms around Clara from behind as she read on the couch. She leaned her head back against my chest. The house was quiet, filled with a deep, abiding peace. The past was finally where it belonged. In the past, and my future. My future was right here, in my arms. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.